Reaching its 20th anniversary this year is 2005's Boogeyman. Not to be confused with the slow-burn atmospheric Stephen King adaptation from 2023, or the 1980 Halloween knockoff that shamelessly used "You Can't Kill the Boogeyman" in its trailer. This Boogeyman was the PG-13 horror movie seemingly designed to terrify middle schoolers into never sleeping again. And back in 2005, you can bet plenty of kids went home from the theater and immediately cleared their closets, checking under their beds and banished any oddly shaped coat racks that could resemble a person in the dark. Sam Raimi, fresh off his success remaking Japanese horror for American audiences, decided to produce this supernatural spookfest. Only this time, there's a monster that lives in the shadows, preys on childhood fears, and may or may not have a thing for hanging creepy decor from bedroom ceilings. But 2 decades later, does Boogeyman still crawl under your skin? Did its moody, J-horror-inspired style win over critics and audiences? Or did it earn a firm thumbs down? And possibly another finger. Which tired trope drags it down, and which modern horror does it share some interesting story beats with? Let's open the creaky closet door and see what the happened to 2005's Boogeyman. After the success of Japanese horror remakes like The Ring, Ghost House Pictures founders Raimi and his longtime business partner Robert Tapert were ready to keep milking the cash cow. Because when you've got a spooky long-haired ghost girl printing money, why stop there? Fresh off their production company's first release and box office hit, The Grudge, they pushed to keep the momentum going and deliver another Japanese-inspired horror flick, all the while keeping a PG-13 rating to bring in the maximum potential box office. Eric Kripke, who would later go on to create the long-running mega-hit Supernatural, as well as The Boys, wrote the original story for Boogeyman, which he cites as his first ever produced screenplay. The script was eventually updated by husband and wife writing duo Juliet Snowden and Styles White. Their supernatural sensibilities stayed intact, later carrying over into projects like The Possession starring Jeffrey Dean Morgan and Kira Sedgwick, and the original Ouija movie, which also marked White's directorial debut. While Boogeyman was one of their earliest collaborations, White's impact on the genre goes back even further. He actually started out in the mid-90s as a special effects artist on hits like Interview with the Vampire and The Lost World Jurassic Park. Director Stephen K. got his start as an actor, working under the name Stephen T.K. He even continued landing small roles until he took a more prominent role behind the camera, eventually helming the 2000 remake Get Carter starring Sylvester Stallone. After a string of film credits, he found more of a foothold in television, directing episodes of Friday Night Lights, Sons of Anarchy, and Yellowstone, amongst several others. Oh, and he's married to Coyote Ugly star Piper Perabo, so there's that. Lucky bastard. Tapert described the Boogeyman as a physical manifestation of fear. For our lead character Tim, that fear takes root as his father disappears when he's just 8 years old, an event that he sees as the Boogeyman taking his dad, despite rationalizing it away as an adult. Tapert noted that the film should appeal to fans of The Evil Dead thanks to its supernatural elements, but also claimed Boogeyman stands on its own, taking enough turns to differentiate itself from the Raimi classic, like, say, featuring a black crow dangling in a child's bedroom, because nothing says safe space for a child like a decorative omen of death hanging over your bed. Raimi spoke to Variety about the universal status of the film's antagonist, saying, "The Boogeyman is a mythical creature that is the stuff of stories of generations," and added, "He is a horrible creature that consumes human beings whole and exists in 1,000 different forms in children's imaginations, living in the shadows of the clothes hung in the closet or the darkest regions underneath the bed. For some of us, the Boogeyman might be Michael Myers or even John Wick, but it's hard to disagree with Raimi's take on the urban legend." While there was some uncertainty over the story's direction, the final film landed somewhere between psychological thriller and supernatural horror. The titular Boogeyman exists in Tim's mind, but also very much in the real world, coming after him in the flesh. Tapert praised the director's approach, saying that Kay chose to make a movie about people first and then layer in the horror, rather than going for a straight-up haunted house ride. Tapert believed the story being grounded in everyday life would make the scares hit harder. Barry Watson, fresh off the long-running CW hit Seventh Heaven, the show that equates smoking pot with murdering puppies, was cast in the lead role of Tim Jensen. The production team had been struggling to find their leading man, but at the last minute, after watching a New Zealand-filmed movie with Watson in the lead role, presumably the 2001 thriller When Strangers Appear, both Raimi and his wife agreed he'd be perfect for the part. Kay pointed out that the role needed someone likable and relatable, someone who could take the audience on an emotionally messy journey without them hating him for it. Well, at least that was the intention. Emily Deschanel said that she was drawn to her character because of her bold, straightforward personality. She plays the role of Kate, Tim's childhood friend, who strangely has no idea of the dark CGI presence haunting him. Deschanel brings much-needed levity to the film, balancing out the dreary vibe with her charisma. Nothing about her performance feels forced or even out of place. She's just a natural-born performer. The film also stars Tappert's wife and Xena warrior princess herself, Lucy Lawless, as Tim's antagonistic mother. Tori Mussett plays Tim's understandably confused girlfriend Jessica, and the late actress Skye McCole Bartusiak plays Franny, a child dealing with her own trauma, as she can see the same nightmarish entity that Tim does. Kay had a very specific vision for the look of the film. In post-production, he had mountains of footage ready for color correction. He wanted to make sure you'd barely see anything. The end result was a movie so reliant on darkness that you'd be constantly guessing what was lurking in the shadows. Was it the boogeyman? Was it a coat rack? Was it the boogeyman standing behind a coat rack? Audiences couldn't help but compare it to Darkness Falls, and maybe not always as a compliment. The film's creepiest moments were planned in detail, mostly using storyboards, from the opening scene where young Tim watches his father attacked and whisked away into the darkness, to the finale where the boogeyman finally steps into the light. That reveal was shot on a green screen with a wired-up dummy, later transformed digitally into a handful of nightmarish designs. One was a twisted version of Tim's creepy childhood action figure, while the other was a man's body with a rapidly morphing sequence of faces that looked genuinely unsettling. The director said it was the most limited time he'd ever had to shoot a movie, which was probably made trickier by the fact that most of the cast was American and had to fly all the way to New Zealand to shoot the film. Presumably, that's at least a couple of days lost right there, just in travel, jet lag, and figuring out which side of the road to drive on. In on-set interviews, the cast and crew cited Japanese horror as the film's main stylistic influence. Kay even mentioned changing the original script's pace to mimic the trendy, slow-burn pace of the subgenre. While mentioning Japanese horror, everyone has a twinkle in their eyes, which only makes me wonder, given the way we look at American J-horror now, if 20 years from now, we'll all look at A24 horror as crap. Let's hope not. Released in early February 2005, Boogeyman actually fared surprisingly well for a film dumped into the notorious death slot month. Opening weekend alone earned back its $20 million budget, pulling in $19 million and landing the #1 spot at the box office. I know I was there opening weekend as a giddy middle schooler. By the end of its theatrical run, it had earned $46 million domestically and another $20 million overseas, bringing its worldwide total to $67 million. Not bad at all for a modestly budgeted horror flick from a brand new production company. But the good news stopped at the box office. Critics and audiences were united in their disapproval, hacking the film to pieces upon release. Its Rotten Tomatoes score sits at a bleak 11% from critics and a slightly less fatal 21% from audiences, with most reviews citing the same triple offense: no story, no scares, and no originality. But as always, money talks, and Boogeyman's commercial success inevitably summoned two sequels: Boogeyman 2 in 2007 and Boogeyman 3 in 2008. Both skipped theaters and went straight to DVD. The second film scraped together just enough sales to justify another installment, but the third barely registered on the radar, and with that, the franchise was laid to rest. Boogeyman feels like a lighter, less intense precursor to Sinister, thanks to a similar premise. But while Sinister's jump scares were definitely effective, in Boogeyman they hit more like someone popping a plastic bag right next to your ear rather than genuine terror. It's understandable that they dialed down certain elements in order to secure a PG-13 rating, but Boogeyman still squanders a lot of potential. The story feels half-told, as if essential pieces were either left on the cutting room floor or maybe never even written to begin with. And that's a shame, because beneath the stretches of dullness and some robotic dialogue, there's a shadow of something more promising, and possibly even compelling. But just like its titular character, it mostly stays hidden in the dark. And that, my friends, is what the f happened to Boogeyman.
Losing time, I'm fading fast. I just wanna make it last. Try to let go of the past. I close my eyes, embrace the blast. And sometimes you just gotta believe there's something that'll give you relief. There's something that'll have what you need, what you need. We're broken, it's tragic, we're not all elastic.
Thank you for clicking on our video, everybody. If you like what you saw here, please make sure you like the video and subscribe and share with your friends who like this sort of content. JoBlo was created by movie fans for movie fans, and we appreciate your support.